Across 20 years, God of War has become one of the century's most iconic game franchises. It follows Kratos, himself iconic, as he hacks, slashes, explores, and battles his way through ancient Greece. After a string of console and handheld titles, God of War has even survived a bold transition to Norse mythology, which brought along some rather big changes in gameplay. But every main title of the series has been acclaimed, and Kratos has earned his spot on PlayStation's Mount Rushmore. I'm Lee Tyrrell, and this is The Sound Test, a podcast covering, in depth, the music and sound of games. To celebrate God of War's 20th anniversary, I'm joined by Gerard Marino, who composed for every single title in the series, up until its Norse era. His work, along with composers like Bear McCreary, Mike Reagan, Chris Velasco, and more, was integral to God of War's atmosphere and grandeur. This year, 2025, sees all their music collected together by Laced Records in a stunning collection of picture discs that covers the entire series. It's just further proof of how important music is to players. So Gerard Marino, welcome onto the Sound Test.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. It's always great to talk about my favorite subject, my music.
And as a creative type, I can completely relate to that. But I mean, there's so much to talk about when it comes to your work with just God of War even. So we'll try and get into this as best as we can today. Usually with my interviews, I like to start as near to the start as I can. So let's go back to something that I read about in some previous interviews with you, where I believe you've talked in the past about actually singing in choirs. If I'm not wrong, I think that you actually sung in some church choirs. And I guess I was interested in how much this background might have had an impact on some of your God of War music, like some of those religious aspects.
Well, the choirs I sang in was mainly in college, actually. So I don't think I really sang in church choirs. I did. I went to Catholic school, and I did play keyboards as part of church ceremonies sometimes. And sometimes I just vamp something while we're doing the ring procession. And so, whatever I happen to know. So a lot of times I was playing Pink Floyd songs in Catholic church. But
now that's really cool to hear, because I'm a big Pink Floyd fan myself. I actually play bass in a Pink Floyd tribute band.
Oh, I would absolutely come see it if it was anywhere near me. Where are you located, really quick? Just really quick.
I'm in the northeast of England, so that might be difficult.
Well, it's going to be a while before I'm there again.
Well, let's see if we can stay friends better than the actual Pink Floyd, and maybe we'll still be on the go when you make your way down here. But one thing I 100% wanted to come to, sort of jumping off from some of the religious stuff that I mentioned in the previous question, another thing that I'd read you talking about a lot in previous interviews, but not digging into as deep as I feel like we maybe could here, because we've got a lot of musicians and producers who listen to this. So I don't mind getting a bit deep in some music theory here. Like, I'm particularly thinking the use of different scales and note choices that you would be using in things like the main theme for God of War. Like you've particularly mentioned in the past, notes like the flattened second or the sharpened fourth, otherwise known as the diminished fifth, which composers would sort of shy away from using.
The devil's interval, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if it wasn't like expressly forbidden, it was certainly kind of avoided for a while.
Yeah, the devil in music, basically. Yeah. That's one of those things that whatever they called it for that, maybe they call it that for one reason, and then we've attached an extra supernatural thing to it over the years. But that's the religious aspect of it. Well, as far as the scales that I was using for the God of War series, I don't know that just the scales themselves, and like the flat 2 and the flat 5, and then the major and minor third, and the same thing. Like anytime, sometimes I would be we'd be playing in the studio, we'd be doing the thing, and then one of the engineers is like, they're figuring out the piano, and they're like, oh, so like all the notes then. But it's like, it's so yeah. I mean, there was not so much of a, oh, well, they used this particular one in this island in ancient Greece or anything. I did just the smattering of research on that, but as you know, if we were going to nerd out here, that a lot of that stuff, the idea that they're called the Phrygian scale or the Mixolydian or the Lydian, named after areas in ancient Greece, whether or not that's what it sounded like, I think that's not, it's like I don't know that anyone can really tell precisely how it was, and that the modes were kind of named, but they weren't necessarily based on some kind of historical find outside of the name itself. So I kind of just went with what kind of feels right when it came to the scales. And so, we've seen in the great Hollywood traditions of desert sword and sandal epics, things like that. It's not so much an Arabic scale that you would hear played on one of those instruments traditionally, as it would be just those things that fly, that come outside of the Western. The fact that there would be a minor third and a major third within the same bar, that the fifth could be flattened, that the seventh could be either way with it. Kind of whatever you needed to do to get the job done, kind of Hollywood amalgamation style. So as far as scales go, that was that. But there's definitely some other nerdy music theory things that went into writing themes that we could probably get into in a minute. And you're probably going to be asking me some of those questions too. So
hopefully we'll have to see about that as we go through. But I'm interested in how you specifically mentioned Hollywood, and I'm pretty sure I've read about you mentioning Gladiator specifically in the past as a touchstone. And one thing I definitely wanted to ask about was, like, where do you aim for with your composition, and where do you feel like you landed in the end with God of War, between, like, say, the Hollywood Gladiator approach of scoring this kind of thing, and, like, really taking big time influence from, like, actual ancient Greek sources? Now, I'm thinking there's things like, don't know if you might have heard of it, but like the Psycholos epitaph.
I should go listen to it and come back and let you know, because I can't remember. I can't remember that. I mean, I know that we did some initial research on some people playing Greek instruments, like from that they've reinvented from the paintings and on the urns and stuff, and what they thought it might sound like, with the tunings it might have sounded like, and we listened to a bunch of that, and it was it's kind of like out there in the way that it didn't. It really sounded more really primitive, in that it was probably not something people would just put on and listen to. It was kind of like, it sounded like kabuki, almost like kabuki theater type things, where it's just, it's a vibe, but it's not so much, I don't know, not even really applicable to most aspects of gameplay. So it was kind of something you could put on and get in your head, and then maybe even put it down while you're going to go take a nap, and then just not really try to get too close to it. So I want to write that down. I want to make sure, because I don't remember that. I don't remember hearing or studying that back in my thing. So
it's called the Psycholos epitaph, and I think that starts with like SEI or something like that. And I think it's like one of the earliest examples of like a fully transcribed melody that we have in history or something like that. It's really cool. But like, honestly, the only reason that I learned about it is because it was used in the Greek mythology DLC pack for Minecraft.
Yeah, well, it's I'm gonna learn something when we get off the wire here. I'm gonna look that up. That's probably is that Gareth Coker who did that one?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. Yeah, he's a cool guy, and he's written some nice stuff, man. I remixed a couple of Ori tunes into a trance piece for my DJ project once. It's good stuff. Anyway, we can probably touch on that later too.
Oh, absolutely. I've got some notes about the DJ stuff.
And let me thank you for actually watching previous interviews and not asking me the exact same questions. I kind of.
I'm a musician. I've always loved to geek out about music theory, and I guess over the years I've kind of built up an audience over here that are just the same. A lot of big music nerds in the audience.
All right. Well, that's fantastic, man.
Well, we've already talked a bit about scales, and I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into that, like through composition of main themes and things like that as well. But one thing I think we could jump straight into, because I think it was quite important in your early days establishing your sound on God of War, was your use of like these big, scratchy noises and sound design, but that's actually coming from like strings and brass, these incredible aleatoric sounds. And I believe that you were one of the first people to like actually build up some sample packs of stuff like this that were getting used quite widely in the industry, certainly by yourself. So I wonder if you could talk about the process of building up those kind of early aleatoric sample packs of these grinding, nasty noises, things like that.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, some of it goes all the way back to undergrad days when I started to learn how these things were done. Because, you know, when I was trying to be some kind of rock star in the 80s and whatever, when I decided to become a composer and learn how to do it right. And in college, you know, also the things I would listen to, there's the spooky parts of the John Williams scores or the Corigliano scores, you know, for movies that I had seen at that point. I was like, oh, and I'm going to learn how to do that. And I thought it was going to be I thought they actually were imagining each note that goes into those things and actually scoring it out. Like, it's like, how do they even think like that? And so thankfully, it wasn't as hard as I expected it to be. Although, you know, you do have to know some things. It wasn't like there's this multi-layered genius thing going into it well, the way I imagined it anyway. So how did I do it? Well, I found out that was a thing, extended techniques and all these things, and also electroacoustic techniques where you record acoustic instruments doing things and then take them in the computer or a tape machine and do funky stuff to it, and so you get that human feeling that's kind of just, you know, messed up. So for those parts of media scoring where you need to have that unsettling stuff, that's one way to go. And so how did it come about? Well, I would just go with the DAT deck, a DAT tape recorder, and a crappy little microphone around to the practice rooms. When somebody's like, you know, warming up their trombone, it's like, hey, what are the craziest, weirdest noises you've ever made? You know, and I just record students making the cool noises that they do when they're just like screwing around, you know, and ask them about extended techniques. So I would go around and record people just trying to, you know, finding out stuff back then. And then later on, when you actually had studied some scores and seen some of the boxes, the aleatoric techniques, I knew that I could do that. And so a couple of my friends and I, in particular at USC, and immediately after, I started in '99 and got out in 2000, the film scoring program it was called then. And really, the sample libraries at the time had zero of the extended technique, aleatoric, Penderecki type things in it, you know. So you either recorded that orchestra or you didn't have it. And anytime we tried to do it, it'd just be some weird organ sound. If you just had a string patch and you're laying your arm on it, it just doesn't work, right? So it's all about the interplay and the air and in the room. So a slightly advanced version of that, you know, going around to just practice rooms. Well, there's, you know, we'd done some recording with students at SC for the student films, and then we would write some things out and then just either record them over at our house in our rooms, living rooms, or if we had some extra time at a recording session at what was called the Spielberg scoring stage at the time. I think it's called the Lucas stage now at USC. We just get them. We do whatever the student film score was, and then have them do some weird stuff afterwards, and just save it, and then put it together. And so, just, you know, some of the scary things that just didn't exist out there. Just quite simply, you know, just like tremolos going all the way up really fast. You know, psycho string type things, and then, or, you know, brass just in the middle, and then different gestures, and so. And then, I think one time Chris Leonard's financed a big one where he just got I had done some orchestration for him, and he just financed it. He's like, okay, we're just going to make a bunch of these gestures and textures and samples because it doesn't exist out there. And then we're going to go record it in Prague, and we can all use it on our own productions, but you can't use it for anybody else but me. And, you know, we could, so it was kind of like our little private thing there. And yeah, so we wound up, me and him and a few other guys had you know, some secret weapons. So when it came, and so using those secret weapons as they were being made, even when I at USC for some of those student projects, I had some scary stuff in there. And then I wound up getting some, you know, you probably have seen the story. Some guy that I met in the apartment building had had his grade school pal's dad was opening a production music library, and so some of that stuff got into that production music library. And so, as far as he knew, I had the chops to make the scariest, craziest, you know, evil-sounding stuff that at the time he knew. And so, I think it was Chuck Dowd called him and said, "Hey, who writes the scariest, most edgy shit that you know?" And I was that guy. And so that's essentially how the path started to open for me to even land this gig.
That's really cool to hear, and I feel like a lot of those huge sounds of which we're talking right here are like really important, in particular to God of War. I've been playing quite a lot of the first one in the week leading up to this conversation, and it's been striking me how well all of that works, particularly with the gameplay, actually, like the hack and slash actual nature of the game itself.
Well, I mean, I got to give just about all that credit to Clint Pachakian, because he's the music manager on that particular project, and all the Greek series for sure. And as time went on, other music editors got in there too. Jonathan Mayer, Joel Yarger, and Chris. Anyway, I'm going to forget people, but really, Clint really, being a composer himself, well-storied composer previous to that in the game industry, he came into that role at Sony right in the middle of God of War 1, back when we were kind of flopping around a little bit because the game was kind of over time and a little bit over budget. And also we had multiple composers. He came in and quarterbacked it down. But he spent all the time of made sure that we started delivering stems. It was actually kind of a big hassle to go back and remix everything, because at the time we didn't have in our digital audio workstations, you didn't have the multi-stem out options. It was kind of like you had to have those inputs on a mixer or something you had to have that already set up if you were going to do multi-channel stems, or else you would have to go print them one at a time. And since I don't think any of us had it set up that way when we were first delivering, and then it's time, okay, we're going to go back and do it all. I mean, it was just days spent going back and trying to recreate those mixes good enough, and then print them down, maybe 2 at a time. Just the situation I had at that time. I just hadn't geared up for that. Most of us hadn't. So it was a freaking hassle. So by the time it came around to the next one, I bought all the gear so I could just go and record it. And because still there wasn't multi-channel out on the DAWs at that point. Like now, kids today, they don't know how good they have it. You can set up this giant template that's already pre-grouped and mixed, and pound out both stereo mixes and stem mixes and 5.1, both in MP3 and WAV, and it's just like it'll just set it down and it'll walk out, and then it'll just for you, which is just amazing. But at the time, no, you had to buy the hardware. If you didn't have the hardware, then you spent hours. So anyway, we did that, and then so Clint, being the consummate composer himself, knew how to just chop everything up. And also, as part of the process, especially David Jaffe, always like, couldn't it be louder, couldn't it be bigger, couldn't it be more? And so every single piece of music written for that wound up being this super stacked pile of stuff. And so when we went back and stemmed it all out, now Clint had these super thick-ass mixes, so he could rip them all the way down into daughter mixes and slowly build them up, put them back together. Sometimes he mixed them up. Like there's tracks with me and Mike Regan's stems going together like chocolate and peanut butter. When I was playing the game, it's like, what is that? Because it's like, it's my piece and something else too. It's like, what the? And then I find out, it's like, well, they were both in E minor. They're both at 130 BPM. So Why not?
Clint Bajakian, complete legend. I'm pretty sure this isn't the first time that I've spoken about him in a music editing capacity on this show, either with another composer. He's had a lot of influence on a lot of people, and it's been a complete honour to actually speak to him twice for this show as well.
Oh, he saved the Kratos theme from the funeral pyre. You would never have heard dun 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 if it wasn't for Clint. And then he also saved the Fate theme at the choir recording. So the Fates theme is this very chromatic thing that.
Is this where he simplified a part?
Yeah. So yeah, like I worked with my pal Costas, and we met this, and he just like did whatever I told him. And so we sent this, and also we recorded the Hollywood Studio Choir for God of War 1, and those people could sight read, with one eye closed, freaking like any kind of 12-tone, whatever. They're just amazing. They're just like the absolute apex. And so the choir in Prague is not quite that, it's more of a community choir, if you will. I mean, they do, especially then, they've done a lot more recording since then, but to have something like it's the soprano part, every part was split two ways. They were really just making no harmonic sense between each other, and so it was just a big old hard mess. And when I first logged in, because there was in whatever, like 10 hours ahead or something, so I'd log in on Source Connect through iChat or whatever it was to listen and give comments in the middle of the night over here. So when I first log in and it comes up and I hear them rehearsing that, and it sounds like a freaking 6th grade choir, and I'm like, oh my god, it's too hard, they're never gonna get it. Ah! And then Clint, after a couple of times, he's like, let's come back to this. Lunch break, he took it in with a pencil and paper and some blank score paper, simplified it, and it came back out, and it got recorded and existed. And so I don't know how many music managers there are out there who can go backstage with a piece of paper and a pencil and a piano and frickin' simplify something over the course of a lunch break to get it on the stand by the end of the day. That's very few and far in between. So he's a giant hero in my book. Again and again.
Oh yeah, he's an absolutely great guy. Like, I even remember for me, like, we had a certain amount of time for an interview that we had set up, and we still had only gotten about halfway through what we sort of needed to get through by the end of it, and he was just like, yeah, totally, let's do a second conversation. So yeah, I've always loved Clint. He's always been such a good guy. You talk about these big stacks of audio that would get sent his way to manage and edit. I can only imagine how much of that there was. Like, you talk about recording the choir for that first game, but I'm pretty sure the vast majority of it otherwise was just done in your own workstation.
Everything else.
So that leads me to think about the percussion within God of War, which on its own is so thick, so stacked. So I could imagine that even just talking about the percussion alone was a lot for Clint to chew on.
It was. Yeah, because I kept asking for it to be bigger, so you're just adding everything. Like, every single low drum I had at the time sampled, And
anvils too, right?
Stole the anvils from the Matrix. Well, I mean, it's actually... I stole them from the Matrix. They're actually... I think it's Hollywood Edge pile driver sample that he was using there. Just that I happened to grab it first from there.
Nothing wrong with that. But as the series is progressing and going through, are you recording more and more actual acoustic percussion?
Yeah. Well, we did. I mean, we got bigger budgets, and we would actually record people, and so the timpani was always. I think the timpani almost was always sampled just because it's just easier to control that. You put that in a room, it just like eats up the whole room. It's one of the hardest things to have in the same room as an orchestra, because you want to have that, and then you don't hear anything, and then everything gets messed up. It bleeds, doesn't matter how many gobos you got. And so if you put them in a room, then it doesn't sound like the timpani you want it to sound like. It's one of these things. Like I think James Newton Howard, he records everything so multi-tracked. His giant orchestral sound is minutely controlled to the edge, everything live. Yeah, I mean, if you got the budget, well, great. But yeah, so we did get to do things. MB Gordy, he's one of the greats of LA studio percussion, and you can write out a hard part and he'll play it sight read, and you can then say, all right, so if you were to write that part, how would it sound? And he'll jam out something like actually cool. And even if it's to a click, somehow these LA players in particular, London players, they'll still put a little ebb and flow and retard and a accelerando here and there in the middle, so that the one still hits, but there's that humanization that comes with that. So somehow they manage to make even the most clicked out thing still kind of feel like it's breathing.
And I feel like that's something that really lends itself well to the gameplay of God of War as well, that real human touch to some of it. But from the perspective of gameplay, there's also the whole dynamic side of music, the player-led, moving through the levels, changing the score, depending on their own pacing, things like that. So, I mean, I guess having so much in terms of recordings and what you're actually bringing to the table musically for Clint to play with is going to help there as well.
And so many layers of it too. Yeah, that's the thing. We give him once we figured out what Clint was doing, like, let me help. And he's like, you just keep writing thick ass shit. And so so then as I was writing it, yeah, and I think everyone else, we just make sure that there's so much stuff for him to play with there and that everything also, one of the clicks or the tricks in doing a vertically stacked interactive thing is to, especially with melodic material, make sure everybody's got a complement. So, like somebody backing it up. Like, let's say you've got the big God of War theme going in the horns, and maybe even octave strings. But if you've also got solo cello and bassoon doing it separate, when you break it all the way down to just percussion, you've still got that melody there. And then if you did want to fade in the other ones, it's not just coming out of nothing. There's actually the melodic things happening, and then it gets thicker, but it was already happening. It isn't like somebody just did that. It feels more scored. And then when you have a music manager team like they do at Sony, where they're working with the developers in the building, they get each build, they structure the music so that they know when things change, just how much time's probably going to be there. They can make longer or shorter loops based on that. And they can also just keep it so that it's not some big, complicated, interactive system that's got a bunch of stacks that come in and out, because that tends to make the music more generic in my experience. In order to make everything work together all the time, you can't just run wild, So if you can switch the music up, though, like we go from room to room, if you've got 5 different room-to-room tracks, and that way you have one layer of interactivity. That way you get to the next room, instead of trying to just add another thing because there's 5 more guys in it. I don't know. If the actual music changes, now you got 2 things. I don't know. It feels more scored. It feels more varied.
Well, you mentioned doubling things up and making sure that everything's got a complement, which makes me think of something else I've read about in one of your previous interviews, about your extensive work in trailers, and you've worked on some pretty iconic movie trailers, actually, over the years. One insight I thought was really interesting was about having to take the music to this really huge place for a peak in the trailer, but then still having to take it further, even bigger, for later on in the trailer.
It was always be funny when you get these notes. You're like, that big moment, it's great. I want to have that energy at the beginning, but I still want it to build to that big moment. It's like, so when you get those notes, it's like, how the hell do you do that? And so, my biggest, the one that always works for that, as big as it is, it's always bigger if you add choir, right? So that was the thing. If everything else is exactly the same, it still sounds huge, but then the choir makes it just actually touch you personally because it's a human singing it. So if you could keep the choir out of it until then, keep that in your back pocket. I don't know, so that way if they do say Could it be bigger? Yes, it could. Because really, that's as much as what made God of War as capable and big and whatever is because they kept asking it for it to be bigger, even though it kind of couldn't be. We just tried to keep delivering it. I don't know. Yeah, if you can like game it a little, or I don't know if you have the conversations in front. There's like more communication I think these days than there were back then, and less in other ways. But yeah, it's a lot of times, and we didn't have as much immediacy. The people have to download things and then put them somewhere and listen to them and not just stream it off of a Google Drive or whatever. It just wasn't that way back then. So it was just harder to get things to people, iterations. And so when everybody's busy, like nowadays we could be Zooming. I've done this where I'm presenting something, and one director's in France and the audio director's in London, and I'm in LA, and I can share the screen of the DAW, and I'm playing it for him, and then he's like, so I see a track called Melissa and a track called Solo Cello, but I don't think I heard a woman or cello. Like, well, I was trying some things out. Can I try that? So, you could actually, it's like they're in the studio. You're actually working together now, so that people who are in either different continents or just busy, like God of War. I mean, they were in Santa Monica. I was in Marina Del Rey. It's only, it's like a couple of miles away, but David Jaffe wasn't leaving the building. He wasn't allowed. He practically not allowed to sleep. He had to schedule his bowel movements and stuff. It was like he was just like the whole time when it got crunchy. And so yeah, it's more like people coming over. So yeah, I mean now it's both easier and harder because now, you could just hit some. It's just like it seems like it's so easy to make changes that people are ready to make changes all the time.
I liked what you said early on there about if you can game it a little as well, because it made me think about, I think from God of War 2 and onwards, there's actually quite a lot of your voice in there, isn't there, right? Multi-tracked, layered up amongst the choir, maybe even on its own.
Yeah. Kind of made that bit and had to lie in it.
Because it worked.
Because, it wound up working. But yeah, so it's like I went to the trouble of getting the Greek lyrics for this thing, and I'm just going to have a choir go, ooh, ah, a sample. It's like, how are they going to know just how good this is? Especially on that later on. The very first thing, the Kratos theme. You've probably seen, and I've said a million times, how I came over with it. Greek words for redemption and revenge, ekthikisi, literacy. I was just going to get the rhythms from it and use that to come up with a rhythmic motive that I would put intervals on top of that would jump back and forth between the flat five and the major thirds and whatever. And as I went around just clicking that out, I thought, well, I'm just going to go ahead and yell it. I'm just going to yell those words, and then that way they'll know that I did exactly what they said. Revenge, redemption. We want to reinforce it. Like, well, here it is. Revenge, redemption. Just yelled 32 times, and then whispered. And then it's like, and then I got into some reverse delay echo things to make it kind of cool and trippy and echoing through time and such. And so the funny thing was that just by yelling it, but having all those sampled orchestra hitting notes and having it mixed together, it actually kind of sounded like I was singing it, even though I was only yelling it. And so I thought, so when it came around to 2, it's like, and we're going to actually have a librettist, and I'm going to send in the first new Kratos theme. It's like, and I'm sure you've heard me say it before, it's like, I got to write a new Kratos theme? After we saved the last one? I mean, you didn't write Darth Vader a new theme for Return of the Jedi, but okay, here it is. But it's like, if I'm going to sell this, they gotta know just how perfect this is with the lyrics in like the God of War font with the translation, and then so I was like, well, if I'm just screaming and it sounds like I'm singing, I'll just sing it, and so even if it's the soprano part, then I sound like an idiot hidden underneath the choir, it might actually just sell the idea. And so I sold the idea. And so I would wind up selling the idea a lot with that. And I wound up having like 2 revisions on the whole score. It was like completely unheard of. But then that means I still had to go and freaking triple track everything and add it to the production time extensively. And then some of the things they didn't have enough choir time, and it's me. The whole track is me singing on top of the sample choir.
You specifically mentioned the Greek lyrics there, and throughout the series I believe you worked a lot with your friend Kostas, right, if I'm pronouncing that properly?
Kostas Christidis. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm particularly interested in this because besides being a musician, I am a writer as well. So the whole idea of like actually matching melodies to real Greek poetry, making sure that the metering of language is extremely important to the composition of the music, that the music is particularly important to the actual metering of the poetry, that's very, very fascinating to me. You could talk about that process a little bit.
Well, it was, the metering came from that. I mean, I'd write the melody after the lyrics were there. Because, and especially because Greek doesn't flow like Latin, it actually, in my opinion, sounds a little more stabby and hitty. There's like upbeats and such. And so, like the Kratos thing, when I sat down, I was like, okay, there's the rhythm. And I go to try to figure out where that goes in the bar. It's like, that's an upbeat. I'm going to actually... Should I start a main theme on an upbeat? Shouldn't it just go, da-da, And it's like, oh, wait a second. Star Wars starts on an upbeat. Sort of. Kind of. I don't know. That's, part of me almost said, oh, I got to rethink that. I can't have it start on an upbeat, because it's like, da-da-da, But that's how you say, "dikisi." And so much Greek is like that. There's like... The accent is usually not on the first syllable, it seems. And so, to me, it sounded more stabby and slashy, which, stabby, slashy game, So it's come up rarely, but anytime I'm tasked with something like that, I try to find, it turned out to be trailer music. This movie I was gonna score, the demo was, and it had something to do with some lost tribe on an island in the Amazon that stopped evolving, and so it was like, so how do I write a theme for them? And I thought, well, and I looked at the ancient languages of the Indian civilization, well, what was called Indians, like the Mayans and the Aztecs. I figured I'd go with ancient Aztec, Mayan something, and apparently the Aztecs write a lot of poetry. They were very poetic. The way that they wrote would make you think they weren't such bloodthirsty, human sacrificers. But like the human sacrifice, they would write beautiful poems about it. They looked at human beings as flowers, and flowers are meant to be cut. And so we would enjoy, the beauty of the flower as it lay dying. It was like, it was wild. So anyway, I used that to write a theme because I was thinking that it would be the way to almost stick it together. And also make me write rhythms, get me out of the head of all that Western art music that I've studied, that perhaps, especially in this case, and in God of War's case, is not maybe the way to go, or could be at least better tuned to the material if it had one of those. I don't know, using those things to inform it. So yeah, that's sort of the thing I've said, which you've probably seen. If you can find something about the IP, the product, whatever the story, the ethos of the game, or the film that you can use to make your musical decisions as a composer, because we have to make these decisions about scales and rhythms, and if you can use anything from the project at hand, even if it's just the title and the rhythm of saying God of War. And so if your theme is da-da-da, da-da-da, then, I mean, you're already at least trying, you're already that much closer to really writing something that could only have been written for that, because that's that. So yeah, I would always suggest to try to find some at least tangentially appropriate language that people don't know too well of, use that as lyrics, write a melody around those words, and then perhaps don't ever use a choir, don't put the words in there, but now you've used that to get yourself going in the vibe, at least some weird psychological tangentially way to get into it, you know? Because if you're writing music, you know that blank page it stares at you, and then it reflects back to you all the talent you wish you had. And
Yeah, I know that very well.
Well, it happens all the time. It's like, you tell yourself, nah, I'm good, I did it, but then it's like, well, maybe I ran out last time. Maybe I got to the end, Because especially you start writing this stuff and it's like, it doesn't sound like, this has got to be the best thing I've ever done. And that's not it, It's, I don't know, the whole process, And I've watched really big people wrestle with it too and pull their hair out, rolling on the couch.
You alluded to it before, but there was a little bit of that with beginning to get started with like the main theme of God of War 2 and things like that, sort of starting afresh with a whole new theme for Kratos. But I know that some of your early inspirations were quite simply the phrase, "the end begins," and the whole concept of Kratos himself being a god now. So how do you translate those two things musically into where you took God of War 2?
Well, for one thing, I kind of felt like Kratos, It's like now they're like, you did great, kid. If you do exactly the same thing, that's fine, but go ahead and try to push it a little. Just don't make it stupid. And then so I kind of felt like, okay, here we go. Swinging for the fences all over the place. And then, but yeah, when they did curveball me when and the first thing, new theme for Kratos. Okay, well, how did I write the last one? And so I still had a little roll around on the piano, am I out of talent thing at first, but then it was like, no, Kostas. And so, and that was so much fun. He'd come over, we just hang out. And so, I don't know how many Greek friends you have, but they're just a delight to hang around. And so there's a whole lot of living that goes with the work. So, and I'd met him working for Christopher Young. And we would go through crucibles of fire every film. I mean, it was almost crunch time the whole time, but it was definitely crunch time towards the end. And so we're pulling 16-hour days, but we'd get there, and he and I would go to lunch at a French restaurant, and we'd have all the courses, including dessert, maybe even a glass of wine, and come back and almost fall asleep at our desk, but and go and do it again for dinner, because we were going to live life while we were doing it. So he's just an absolute joy to hang with. And so he'd come over, we kind of do that. We're just talking about lyrics. And I'd say, here's what we have to say. It's like, how do we say, accept your fate, or I will destroy them. And so he would come up with the words, but then he'd also, being a composer himself, we'd work it out to make it be more poetic, which is more than I could ever get from Google Translate or whatever else. Like, I think the first game, we had like one long ode to Ares from a urn poem that we pulled every single lyric off of, and so it's all some version of, it was like Kratos instead of Ares. It was, hey, you're the badass of all time, but all from that one poem. So now we got to write our own poems, and Kostas is a composer, and so he actually wrote poetic stuff. And then, I'd get fan mail from fans in Greece saying, I couldn't believe it. I walked into the Temple of Fate and it says, embrace your destiny, but not just, it's like, it's like you wrote it for me. Like, well, I kind of did. But anyway, yeah. So, when you get those opportunities, so, I mean, why was it, how did I address it? Well, just, I put it in the lyrics. And what was funny, that was one of the revisions. Play the first End Begins thing. And I should say, I got the End Begins from a poster that was hanging when we went for the first meeting. So marketing came up with that completely outside of that. And I should point this out to folks. I was thinking about this the other day. It bears repeating. So we would not have had soundtracks for God of War 1 or God of War 2 if the marketing department didn't see the value from a marketing standpoint of having those things. They financed it because we spent the whole music budget on music for the game. And so to make all that other stuff happen, they paid for it. And they named the tracks because, at least some of them, because, we could put the suggestions in, but they wanted to make sure it served their purposes. But that's the thing. I mean, it's a team effort here, right? So, I'm a musical genius, but these are my employers, and this is the playground they built that needs, me to be in it, but it wasn't made for me. So, as a composer, the best thing, if you could bring the whole team together and be part of the whole team, and really just marketing that way, I would have never thought. Of course, you imagine. John Williams just like fixes everything. I mean, the album is what it is. It's whatever he wants. It's his vision, and etc. And maybe it is, but then you get there, and it's like, yeah, we're not going to have an album. Okay, actually, marketing's going to pay for an album, so you can send your suggestions for what tracks and what they should be named. Like, my suggestions. So the first time I was shocked, but then the second time around, I saw that and I knew that, and it's like, all right. That's something. That's something we can start with. And then also knowing that they paid for the last one. If I actually write the whole main theme based on something they came up with, like they aren't going to be all fucking on board with doing another one, just as long as I sat with Costas, they sat to work out that. So, so why wouldn't we take the power of marketing, the power of music, put it together, and then we all freaking make it. And and also the Video Games Live Tour, I think I sold, Tommy, I should say, Tommy and Jack and me and Chuck with the wherewithal to actually pay for a couple of things and pull the strings to make sure the permission got made. We sold PlayStation 3s, a lot of them worldwide. People who were hardcore Xbox fans would see the God of War segment and go, and they'd yell at me in the autograph line like, no, I'm going to have to buy a PlayStation.
Well, I think, like I said earlier, I've been playing it myself for a couple of weeks now, leading up to this conversation, because I'm pretty sure when the original God of Wars were first coming out, I was still very much in a GameCube era and didn't have a PS2 myself. So it's been a complete blast to play it these couple of weeks. I've been absolutely loving it.
Yeah, it's something, right? And it's, especially the first one is really... It's just fun, it's fun. You're just like, eh. And then they kind of, doubled down and tripled down as time went on. And I think maybe they dialed it back a little and added some different elements for the Norse series. So, I think the joke was, what was it? Witcher 4, God of Norse. I think somebody made a joke. Because, there's some crafting and there's some... Or The Last of Norse. Yeah, it was kind of like if they took Uncharted and Last of Us and God of War and then did something with it. And so, that's just like I took the marketing tagline and turned it into the theme. And that's like an iconic thing. And people have made fun of it and made goofy cartoons with the misheard lyrics. And, it's fun stuff, man. So, the fact that... And we did a MySpace campaign where they put the stems for that new Kratos theme out there to the entire world to do a remix contest to be on the God of War 2 album release. And, and so, so it was like, great. That's everyone working together and making cool stuff happen. So.
Is that the Junkie XL remix I saw on the album?
They just hired him to do that. So he did that with with Colossus stems. There was two different, he totally reversed and chopped them up so much you could barely understand. I mean, you could barely see that that's where it came from. It's actually a bitchin' remix he did there. But no, the track I'm talking about is called Godlike. It's a guy named George Doman, George Tragic Doman. He's a rapper. At the time, I think that was before SoundCloud. He was a MySpace rapper back in the day. And he's still rapping, and it's actually kind of a shame that that's not on the vinyl.
I was commander of the Spartan army, ruthless and cunning, no one could harm me, no one could really touch my army. Besides me, I was the ruler of the empire, hold no trust in gods, cause the ways are getting old. I'm full of revenge towards my foes, risk anything and everything to reach my throne. I'm the lord, the god, the king, the emperor, gold and war forever. My nails, my enemies' heads, chop them off, leave them severed. We lose never, my army is larger than Athens, Greece, to sail across the seas, who's better than the god, a king like Kratos. Everybody wants to reach my throne, but they know I die no more. I'll face everyone in defeat, no peace, I'm ready for war. Who's ready for me?
You know, and actually, you know what? I don't know. Yeah, the End Begins to Rock. We did a version of The End Begins with a metal band up in the Sony studios for Guitar Hero, and it's actually the most downloaded track in PlayStation Guitar Hero history. I mean, it was free, so that helps. But they even downloaded more than the Halo one on the Xbox. But so take that, Marty O'Donnell. No, Marty and I are friends, and it's just funny. Like he'll always, like when he did that track with Paul McCartney. He was at Gang Awards. He just come up to me. I know you think you're cool, but you're not this cool. And then it's like a voicemail from Paul McCartney.
Oh, wow.
So, but anyway, so I'm going to pitch it. Why don't we do a single, a 45 of And Begins to Rock with Godlike from George Doman on the B-side. Just, like the equivalent of DLC. But, for the completists.
And since you mentioned The End Begins to Rock, I actually really wanted to ask you about the virtual video game orchestra version of this that's available, with loads of different musicians collaborating together on this, and you were involved in editing and splicing it together, right?
Yeah, well, that's a group that does that. Like, they were born out of the pandemic, and they all wanted to play, so they started their virtual orchestra, where everybody would just record their part in their bedroom and send it in, and they'd try to mix it all together. And so a friend of mine, Jose Ruiz, who is the co-director of the UCLA Game Music Ensemble, which is a dear friend of mine and programs God of War semi-regularly, including March, where my daughter got to sing the soprano for the first time live.
Oh yeah, I saw that on your pinned tweet.
Yeah, it was a fun, bringing the family into it type thing. But anyway, so he knew these guys, and so they asked him if I'd be interested, and of course, man, I'm ready to do something like that. So yeah, that was, I think, towards the end of the pandemic, or maybe it was dead middle. But yeah, we were all in our bedrooms trying to make some cool noise.
Nice, and that version's particularly cool as well, so I'll make sure that I get a link in the description for that. But that leads me to wanting to ask about some of your DJ sets as well, incorporating stuff like your music from God of War. Really, really interesting. So how did those come about?
I was going to be some kind of pop star in the 80s, Duran Duran beats Prince with Iron Maiden thrown together, like boys and I in high school were trying to do some big hybrid thing, and then all the bands broke up for all the reasons they do, and so anyway, I wind up where I am. But then Video Games Live, it's like, wow, and then I got to conduct a couple of times, and I got to feel that rock star energy that I initially thought I wanted to get into the whole thing for way back when. And also I hosted this Orlando Nerd Fest festival, which was that's when I discovered nerd music, that there was this big vibrant community of rappers and rockers and new wavers and DJs all building that kind of music, but based on video game things. And it's like, well, I want to have some fun too. So I thought, how about Video Games Live for the club? Like all the greatest favorite musics, because my tagline was, when you combine the beautiful, heart-warming melodies of everyone's favorite video game music with the slamming beats of today's club you've got the cheat code to the banger. And so the idea was, you want the music that makes you actually want to move has got a beat to it. The melodies from all the video games from time immemorial up until now, you have that personal connection from having listened to that music while you were going through those things. So put those together and it'll make the nerds dance with the cool frat boy clubbers, maybe. I don't know, the idea, we could bring it all together, perhaps. So, and I'd been for about a year or two working this thing up as kind of a sort of a side hustle, and also to be a force multiplier, a value add, if you will. To any game marketing department would think, if I'm going to go on tour with the music to all these different festivals in the world, why wouldn't you want me to bring, wouldn't that help you choose me to write the music? I mean, I'm going to give you the good music. I'm also going to give you years of marketing after the fact. Everybody's happy. I get to have fun beyond the studio. Because I tell everybody, when you get into this, if it's enough for you to come up with those 4 bars that are magic and you dance around in your little garret of an apartment to and before anything happens, if that's enough for you, great, you're going to be fine. Because and so that's great. But if you can actually go out and be with the people who liked it in their little darkened apartments, that's really, that's kind of what I thought I was getting into music in the first place for. I'd go out there and be on stage and have those big, live experiences and bring them to people. And so, if we could do it both, great. So that was my idea of doing that. And, pandemic kind of shut me down, and I've only done a couple of things since then. I hadn't really 100% started up again, because I just was kind of, is it really going to be worth it to do it all? I'm starting to really think, one more swing at it, because, Hans Zimmer did it both pre and post pandemic. We got Ben McCreary out there doing it now. It's like, well then, maybe it's time, if it's, so I think I probably am going to take another swing at that fence.
But all this DJ sets, covers from around the world, things like that, just go to show, for me, how popular video game music truly is, always has been, and is starting to more and more get the celebration that it deserves through things like this incredible 20th anniversary God of War collection of records. Vinyl from Lace Records, absolutely beautiful, from the artwork to the actual picture discs themselves, to the fact that it is a pretty much complete collection of everything, like including the PSP games and all. I mean, how does it feel for you as the composer to have something like this brought together of your work?
The reason, probably, one of the linchpins for why I'm doing this thing, where I ever even thought that I wanted to write music for media, is because when I was in 4th grade and Star Wars came out, and it was a life-changing thing for everybody, best movie anyone had ever seen, the first record I bought with my own allowance money was the Star Wars soundtrack, and it came in a double vinyl, and it was a book, and there was an insert book with John Williams talking about everything and the list of everybody that was involved, and so I just poured over that while I was listening to it, and stared at that, picture of Darth Vader on the back, and look at some of the things on the inside, and then read everything. Just imagine myself playing the trumpet there and the cello there, and I think I even conducted and interpretive dance with a golf tube lightsaber, and so I thought vinyl had gone away. Well, like I say, when God of War 1 came out, that's when iTunes, I think, was really starting to hit. Sony was going to initially only release the God of War soundtrack on their iTunes competitor service, which is no more.
Well, for the time, even that was pretty good.
Yeah, and they're exclusively on our streaming. So they actually saw the value, marketing department saw the value and expressed it to them. So, but anyway, so for me, all the music I experienced when I was a kid, that I bought, that my sister bought, was on a record, and you would sit and listen to it, and you would read about it with the book, and look at the pictures of the band or the orchestra or whatever it is. So I was a little surprised that the whole vinyl resurgence thing happened, but I am very happy that they've decided to go ahead and honor us with this big collection of all of it. That now everybody's going to be able to experience music the way I used to experience, where it was really about the music. Even though you're imagining the movie or maybe the game, in the case of Star Wars or God of War, all the information that's there, all the art, the pictures, it's like you're experiencing it again in your mind. Because, back then we didn't have the streaming or the VCRs even. So that movie came out, and they would re-release movies, but it would be years later. You'd have to wait for the next one. You have to listen to the music to imagine how cool it would be or how cool it was and what it might be. So it unlocked a lot of imagination for me, and the fact that I'm honored with it's really an honor that Lace Records and Sony decided to put this out now, everything completest, and also to do it individually too, so that if you can't just drop $300 or whatever it is on the whole collection, you could piece it together, starting with your fave. So yeah, I mean, if I was in 4th grade, my allowance would not have been $300, but so I would have been able to buy one, not 20 or however many discs are in this. But yeah, so it's fantastic they're doing it. The fact that somebody is going to use it, they're going to experience the music, they're going to sit down, not just like have it on their pods while they're on the subway. You have to sit down in your place, hopefully your nice thing, even if it is with headphones. It's great. It's like people are going to experience it the way that maybe I'd like them to. Even if we want to get all nerdy and technical, chances are, that records, that all music that came out on a record first doesn't sound as loud compared to the stuff that came out in like 1990 or 91, because you don't have to worry about the needle skipping anymore. You can slam it and put all that bass in it.
Well, I was going to ask, actually, about the potential remastering for vinyl process and how much you might have been involved in that.
Well, I don't know exactly what they did, to be perfectly honest. It was almost a surprise to me. It was funny, I had the idea. I talked to one of my pals over in production at Sony, Pete Scaturo, and he gave me the number of somebody to talk to, because I said to him, why don't we do a vinyl release? He's like, you should talk to so-and-so about that. And then this thing got announced before I could even talk to him. So they've already, of course they thought of that. But
I imagine it's going to sound beefy anyway.
Well, it'll be as beefy as they could have it on vinyl. So, y'all, if you really want to be an audiophile about it, you're playing it through your tube preamp. Maybe you get yourself a tube EQ, and then you can, or even a subharmonic synthesizer, and then you can do that full 1970s audiophile experience and make it as big and warm and goofy as you want to, because that's what everybody used to have to do, because vinyl, it has what it has. It can do what it can do. So, but, really, I listened to Star Wars on a self-contained little record box that had 2 terrible speakers attached to it, and it still just reached all the way into my soul. So whether it's AirPods, whether there's not as much bass as I would have put in it if I was mixing it for CD, whatever, man. Hopefully, and I think it does, I think the melodies that we all wrote do resonate, apparently, still to this day, to Sony, the powers that be, and to the fans, so yay.
And as the interviewer, I still feel, after an hour of conversation, that there's plenty more we could get into, but I would be cautious about taking up too much of your time.
Well, as it turns out, I mean, as long as Greg's okay, I can stay a little longer, because something else got canceled a little bit later, so we could go a little longer. Like, one thing I want to throw in, that from way early, we were talking about being nerdy about themes and such. So, as you've probably seen in some of the interviews, the Kratos theme got saved later. First it was loved, and then it was not, and then it was thrown away, but then it was brought back. So, the main theme, da, 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 da. So how did I come up with that? You know, the nerdy thing is that they wanted, it's like, okay, so that last theme has all the, you know, the aggression, the meanness, but there's something missing, and I think it's the pathos, you know, he's sad. We don't have any sadness in here. We don't have any moroseness. And so how about something that touches on that? And so at that point, you know, I didn't even use lyrics for that one at the time. It was kind of like, So the way I came up with it ultimately, after rolling around and thinking I'm going to get fired and out of talent and la la la, how could they not like that? I think I just blew my wad. I don't think. So anyway, so what I did was I just was like at the piano, just like holding down clusters, and then I came up with a cluster that I thought just like hitting it would kind of felt like what I think they said was missing. And the cluster was B, C, E, and E? No. B, C, F, and G. And so there was just something about it, that cluster chord. And so I had this like set theory 12-tone row generator thing, which you could spreadsheet thing that you could put as many numbers in it as not. You didn't have to have 12. So I just put it in four-note matrix. I put those notes in it, and then it spit out all the retrogrades and the inversions and the whatever. And so I just started putting those in different orders. I picked out the ones that I liked that strung together nicely, and that's where that came from. So kind of a half-assed version of set theory, plus a cluster chord that had the feeling I thought, and then lyrics added later to that one. That's like I think the only theme that didn't have lyrics driving it first. And then that's also where it might be the first time that Ode to Ares urn poem came into play.
That's really, really interesting to hear, and I'm glad that we could get a little bit more into some of the music theory geekery side of things, definitely, which leads me to one of the questions I definitely had, which was to ask you as a composer how you kind of approach a melody, a key main theme melody that you know is going to be variated so many times throughout the soundtrack in so many different ways. I guess I'm asking, how do you prepare a melody to be that malleable?
Well, I mean, like a good theme, I think ultimately is going to probably be variated, or possibly, because when you're writing a theme, you know, it's a lot of, let's see, let me gather the thoughts. Because really, like, when I had to sit down and write the first thing that I wrote, that was ultimately the Kratos theme, they'd said, we want this theme to be able, every time he does something cool, it plays, like the Indiana Jones theme. And so I went to study the Indiana Jones theme. Like, what is it? And so, because structurally, it's that motive and those intervals, and it does it 3 times, and it changes a little bit on the 4th time around or whatever. So it's like, so that's the structure. And so while I was thinking about that, it was like, well, you know, I went to college for 5 years and nobody taught me how to write a theme, you know? So how the hell do you write a theme, you know? Like when I'm trying to sit down to write the most important theme of my life, I realized nobody told me how. And so, you know, because everyone thinks, well, you just have to write it because it's going to come from, you know, the heavens or whatever. But there's no technical aspect to it. So I figured out what my idea with the technical aspects were, which was the 2 building blocks anyways, repeated rhythmic motive of some sort, and interesting intervallic relationships. You know, so first you gotta have the rhythm, probably. I mean, cavemen started music with rhythm, ultimately. You know, some kind of rhythm, even if it's disjointed, and then you know, some jumping around, you know, or some straight lines, you know. How do we get from these parts of the measure that we've chopped up with the rhythm, how do we get from there to there? Is it a straight line, or is it a jump, or whatever? And then once, so those are the building blocks. Like, nobody ever told me that, you know. And so that's what I figured out anyway. That's what I came up with, and I started using that ever since then. And it was funny too. my good pal Wataru Hokiyama, who's a composer in games. And his first big game was for a Sony game called Africa, where you take pictures of wildlife. And they that's another crazy success story. The developer in Japan went to Google and said Hollywood film composer, and Wataru was on the first page, and he went to his site, and Wataru writes very flowing Williams-esque type stuff, at least at the time he did, and so he got the job from his freaking website that some Japanese developer Googled. He happens to be Japanese and can speak the language. It's probably why Google stuck it on the first page, maybe. But so anyway, he's having the same thing. He's rolling around on the piano going, "How do I write a theme, Gerard? You wrote this theme for God of War. It's like I forgot." Like, you didn't forget. But here's what I said, and I gave him my little spiel. I just did that, and he's like, "You're right. Thank you." And then he went off and he wrote one of the most beautiful themes I've ever heard in a game for that thing. It's just like that. That's like that score makes me want to go out and be a better person after I hear it. It's just like, I mean, it's that good. The main theme, it's just orchestration, fucking masterclass too. But
damn, well, I think I'll be checking that out after this.
I don't know. I was just laughing about the times. Just like we do as composers. Sometimes, I mean, we talked a little bit about it. It's like there's the imposter syndrome is just it's like ready to pull you down anytime. It's all the accolades that I've gotten and all my hard work was appreciated. And it's being today, 20 years later. But still, it's like. So you still you think if we go and listen to a Beethoven's late string quartet of some sort, or even just the Fifth Symphony, who the hell do I think I am compared to that?
Well, so, it's almost like that period was like this strange compositional mathematical peak, kind of, and we've kind of expanded on that more and more in modern times in some pretty interesting ways by incorporating more and more sound design, playing around more and more with electronics and things like that. And I often think, like, as fantastic and genius as Beethoven was, I don't think he could have really wrapped his head around something like The Prodigy or something like that.
No, he wouldn't have heard anything. Well, literally. But he wouldn't have even, if he could hear, he wouldn't have heard it because they were over there. They weren't on the radio,
Of course. But that does remind me of something else I wanted to bring up today, which was a connection that I've always sensed, and my dad always had as well. He always talked about this growing up, was between metal and classical music, like how metal some classical music can actually be. And of course, the rather more obvious influence of classical music on metal. It's a connection I sort of sense in your work, God of War.
Yeah, especially metal post 1990. Well, there's sort of a connection because because I was in all those bands, and then when I come to do it right and learn how, that ultimately I saw that there's parallels, and that to do it right, it's kind of the rightness would be writing for an instrument in the way that instrument is designed for, like trying not to force a flute to play too low or and expect it to sound good, or like the right way to write for it's more like the technical things. As far as right way to write music, you just got to write music. And so also the only way you can write original music is, I studied. They show how the serialists took the chromaticism all the way off. It's like, this is where we're going. This is it. And so they divorced the ear from the process, and so that's an interesting academic experiment. But if you actually want to write music that reaches people, it's got to be music that I say the way you write original music is that you bring your personal music experience, life experience, etc. to whatever the venue is, the orchestra, the rock, the metal, the string quartet, whatever it is. It's like everything you've ever heard or listened to in your parents' car, or your car, or what was playing in high school for you, and when you were, asking a girl to go to the prom, or dancing slow and then getting your first kiss after. Those sorts of things, that's what makes you and so all of those things mixed together is the way if you can bring all that together and somehow channel it, the little pieces and parts from those and everything that's also going on currently, then you're going to write what feels like original music, even if it's still going to be ultimately tied to the harmonic series and the way a string vibrates and go 1, 4, 5 probably at some point. So that's how I say you can write original music. So it's a way to also get around the imposter syndrome, because only I could have written this music. I mean, even if it does suck compared to, in my mind or whatever, compared to what Beethoven would have done, he couldn't have written it.
No, and I think that's exactly what I was trying to get at, is that we're so far removed from that now. Like, technology has allowed us to understand so much more about cultural music from around the world, start incorporating things like that, influences from there, electronics, of course, things like that, and like mentioned earlier, sound design.
Yeah. And the sound design thing, I mean, you can see in film music that there's kind of an ebb and flow around that sometimes, where they get more into interesting sounds, and then they'll go back to more traditional melodies. And then there's always outliers in between all the way through. But there's a lot of game scores that are sound designy, or just, or it's, a lot, not as melodic as I maybe like them to be. Because like I've said 1,000 times, it's music that stands the test of time has a melody in it. It's that melody that you can turn into whatever, an acoustic guitar, a elevator track, a cool loungy spa. But it's like that cool loungy spa vibe, or that heavy metal vibe is a vibe, but what goes in there that makes it an interesting piece to listen to? And that's probably going to be melody. If it's going to last for any amount of time, to have anybody humming it, you have to be able to hum it. I mean, even if it's the most rudimentary of all melodies, if it was just a riff, you're not going to completely, in a nursing home, be humming. You're going to go, there's going to be half notes at least, So, and you can't hum a sound effect. You can't hum even an aleatoric string run. I mean, that stuff it has the effects that it wants, but it doesn't, and it strikes the fear or the feeling, but it's not the thing that you think about and relive and try to relive or enjoy reliving.
Like the Old Grey Whistle test, if you know that.
I don't.
It was an old British TV show that used to play a lot of live music and things like that, but it got its name, the Old Grey Whistle test, from some studio somewhere had a philosophy whenever they were recording music there, that they knew that they had a hit on their hands, because like the building's janitors or the cleaners or whatever would still be whistling the tune the next day from recording it.
That's a cool one. I mean, I've heard versions of that, I've heard the for musicals, like for musical theater, does your musical pass the piano and a potted plant test, because like if the potted plant is the extent of your production value and the piano, is it still a good musical? It's a good musical if it works with that, right? And what I always say, it's a good song if you can play it on an acoustic guitar at a campfire and somebody falls in love with you.
Well, speaking of strong melodies, one thing I absolutely wanted to talk about today before our time was up was your music for the character of Calliope and the prominent use of flute, of course. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so yeah, actually, and playing Chains of Olympus, my daughter was pretty young, but she was running around and talking and being cute when I was working on that. And then when the game came out and I played it, and at the end you have to push her away to try to save the universe, and it's like, fuck the universe. I was ready for it to go. I did not like that. I mean, that part of the game really was hard for me. on the freaking PSP. It's like, no, I don't want to. I just went through hell, and then I found her. And I accidentally killed her, and I felt so bad all this time, and I don't know. So anyway, yeah, how do you write for that? Well, there's like two things that went into that, and not lyrics. Now that I should bring it up, I guess that's another one that I just, what I did was I did some research, and there's this Greek lullaby. There's a traditional Greek lullaby that I found out there on some collection of lullabies of the world that I thought was it was always kind of neat. So I thought it should be, lullaby-ish maybe, something that you could sing to a baby or hum to a baby. And it's kind of funny how edgy that particular Greek lullaby is. And then so there was that, but also Chains of Olympus. So there wasn't a giant budget for a ton of music to be written and no recording at all. So it was like, how do we? And so we were going to leverage a lot of music that had already been written for the series as it might apply. And so there was this ambient track that I'd written for God of War 1, and I think it was so creatively named Ambience 2 or something. But there was like a halfway melodic part in it that was that they referenced to me when they were like, what's missing from the Kratos theme that we want in the main theme. Something about the feeling of this ambient track we like. So that one, it had this like partial melody in it. So what I did was I wrote a melodic lullaby type thing for the best flute sample I had, which I made with a composer friend's wife. I'd actually made it previous for a different project, but it at the time sounded a little bit out of tune and mournful to the point where I don't know, real enough. So I wrote that part of the melody there, but I wrote it so that it would spill into the part of the melody that was very well represented in a long-ass ambient track that was multi-tracked or whatever. So that way they'd have it like stuck to previous music very well. And then so there was that, and then there was also a couple of tracks based around it, like Calliope Combat and whatnot. I'm not even sure if all of that's on the record. I'm pretty sure the ambience track is not. That was one thing. When selecting some tracks that would 4 cool tracks from the series to maybe play in the background while we're talking. I selected a few, but going through some of them, I was just reminded of. And I wanted to make sure that they were on the record themselves, because there was tons of music written for these series that just would fill everything. Since you do have physical limitations on an album, not every track ever written is on it. Some of it shouldn't be. It's very, workmanlike. But a couple of those ambient tracks, including this one, I don't know that that's on there. I don't know, maybe 30-year completist version will come out. I don't know, but because some of them are nice. Some of the combat tracks too it doesn't. It's like some of the pieces that we put in there, just the really things that make you, from the cinematics or the themes themselves, really just kind of give you the feeling of it. And so then they get used to make the combat stuff and the sneaking around and the suspense, as we call it.
I suppose there's only so much space, even on a collection as complete as this, because besides your work, and this is just considering the God of War games set around Greek mythology, there are so many awesome composers involved, and I'll try and be as complete as I can with this. But Ron Fish, Mike Regan, Winifred Phillips, Winnie Waldron, Chris Velasco, Marcello De Francisi, I hope I'm pronouncing a lot of these right, Jeff Rona, so many great composers involved in God of War over the years. And I believe that you and some of you guys who went on to compose for several games in the series actually built up quite a camaraderie over the years, right?
In particular, yeah. So the core group is myself, Mike Regan and Chris Velasco and Ron Fish, and man, talk about when we would get in a room to go at a recording or something, and then of course the dinners and the drinks afterwards. Talk about a room full of main character energy. I mean, you could barely fucking breathe in there, and every single one of those guys is just like A, brimming with talent, but B, funny as hell, absolute joy to be around, and certainly a lot of ribbing, old school type, chops busting and stuff like that, making fun of each other, and so so yeah, I mean, there was a certain amount of rivalry, of course, because it's like, yes, I'm the God of War composer. And so we had this like I'm Spartacus joke going on throughout whatever. If you know that story, classic movie. They're asking for the slave Spartacus to stand up, and just as he stands up, somebody else does, and the whole group of slaves confesses to being Spartacus, because there's like, if he goes, we all go, kind of thing. So that was our little joke there.
And that reminds me of the last scene in Life of Brian as well, where everyone's claiming to be Brian to get pulled down off the cross. I'm Brian and so's my wife.
That's probably more like what it was like. Yeah. So no, it was great. And in the tracks I picked, I was trying to have a good collection of stuff that had, in particular, all those guys, because especially in 2, we kind of like got together, we went through, read it all, we came up with like, I'd like to do this theme, I'd like to do that theme, and whatever. So we kind of halfway, chopped up the world there a little bit, and it was great. So then once the themes got written and approved, we'd get them, we'd hear them, and then so when it came time to score cinematics, and usually I was the cinematic guy, but we'd have each other's themes. So, and we'd pull it full Wagnerian leitmotif style with, Atlas is doing his thing, so the Atlas theme's going, Gaia comes in, and it's the Titan theme anytime with Titan. And so they're usually nice melodies that you can just, maybe they were written, da, but then you can play them soft, and they go through and back and forth, and Kratos talks, and da-da-da, and Athena talks, da-da-da-da. I mean, it was really full-blown Wagnerian shit that we were doing with that, and so yeah, and it's great, I mean, at first, I could do it all, but the fact that everybody was kind of bringing a certain of their own experience to the thing, it's you wind up having the source material to work with that is, diverse and varied. That it's just like it's just better than it could have been if it was only one person, and just like too many cooks. It's a thing, but if you got a quarterback like Clint Bajakian, keeping it straight, a coach or whatever, putting the right players in the right places, and then and working with them privately so that they can throw further or run faster, whichever the thing is they need to do. You wind up with something that sticks really good, because I've worked on games when it's they don't have the same level of team. And also the same level of time or money to just make it all work. So, you might write the best music you can and the best system you can, but then it's implemented in a way that it doesn't quite achieve what you do over here. I mean, it really feels like that game's getting scored as you play it, whereas there's other games where you can tell. You get used to, what the system's doing. After that 5th room, it's like, all right.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But I fully sense the level of craft that's gone into God of War, the music team especially. But you mentioned it earlier, even with just the marketing team. I can truly feel the passion around God of War and how cool and special you all wanted it to be.
Yeah. I mean, we all really care, and they do too. So there's been times in the composers griping about, they're actually looking at Instagram followers to see if you actually are even hireable. It's like, well, that sucks a little bit, but at the same time, they can be our biggest allies. I mean, they will be the ones who will their job gets done better if we can all come together on that. So we're on a team. We're not all, and it's definitely not. Unless it's Guitar Hero, it's not a music game. It's a game, and we're this part of it, and important, sure. But if nobody hears about it, then we need marketing, or else nobody's even going to know. And and we need everybody in between who's not a expert composer, who doesn't realize what a fucking genius you are for coming in here with this. We're going to quote the Cyclos epitaph, and we're going to stretch it out, and then they listen to it. And I'm telling you, that's exactly the thing. You can come in with this perfectly crafted thing, and then sounds kind of like Star Fox. And then, if it hits them different, then as great as it might be, off it goes. Happened to Gabriel Yared on Troy. Wrote a fantastic, beautiful kind of Miklos Rozsa-esque score for that thing, and I guess a couple of test audiences were kind of thinking it was weird, and I don't know, it got tossed, and James Horner came in and wrote a score in like a week. and it works. It's got his little signature da-da-da-da in there.
God, Troy, I saw that in the cinema years ago.
One of these computers, I have the bootleg stolen mix of the lost score. It's probably out in the world now if I have it. But I'd like to see somebody edit it together. But I don't know. That happens sometimes. Sometimes your gift to the world is not gonna, with the great framework of what this multimedia project of a game would be. Maybe it's got to be a little bit less genius,
If needs be, if it's called for, but it certainly doesn't seem the case for God of War. And I'm so glad that it's still being celebrated today, still being discovered today by people like me, who have just had a marvellous time playing and researching God of War leading up to this conversation. And Gerard, it's been absolutely fantastic to speak to you. Thank you so much for bringing so many wonderful insights to the show, and for being so open and so friendly with everything. Thank you for joining me on the sound test. It's been a real pleasure.
All right, yeah, pleasure's mine, really.